a lot of the implementation of this constitution has been left to the political elite, which is made up predominantly of the older generation, people who experience the other constitution. Do you think that probably that has slowed down the level of implementation, that these people are still stuck in history and their understanding of what government and presidency and what it meant, and probably that has curtailed their level of assisting in implementing this new document?
Thank you very much. And that's what I was saying, when I get an opportunity, I will try to give a context to it. That's why you understand how the constitution has really evolved to where we are, and why the old people, the political class, has this monotony of trying to capture the government and trying to do it in their own style, and disregarding what this document says. Now, every time I usually indicate that I work with this document, because the Constitution of Kenya 2010 is a living document that addresses real issues in real time, in the real time space. If you look at our history as a country, it would be very bad if we ignore the history that our country has had. For example, if you look at the earliest forms of what a constitution was, it dates back to, it's something that, again, I will say it's not a new concept. It has been there for a long time. And if you look at, historians will tell you about the codes of Hammurabi, which had 282 laws. 262 laws in them, the codes of Hammurabi. And if you come into now the Kenyan context, you'll see that the Kenyan constitution, the earliest forms of what you had of a constitution was the Littleton Constitution of 1954. That was one of the earliest forms of a constitution that we had. It was a very progressive constitution, but the problem is the Africans did not understand it. So they opposed that constitution. That is 1954. That was after the state of emergency by Sir Evelyn Baring. But remember, during the state of emergency, some rights were suspended during that time. So it was a learning point for the Kenyans. In 1958, we came up with something called the Lennox-Boyd Constitution of 1958. Again, it wanted to increase the number of ministers in parliament. Again, the Africans denied it because they felt that there was no public participation. That's why it's very important in a constitution, public participation. They were not involved. So it was not their document. If you look at the 1960, 1962, and 1963 Lancaster House conferences, which brought out the new constitution, the independence constitution of 1963, you will see that our Africans were much involved. KADU, Kenya African Democratic Union of Rwanda and Ngala, and KANU, the ruling party, or the party of Jomo Kenyatta at that time, were all involved in the Lancaster House conferences, and they came up with the 1963 constitution. But what did this constitution actually achieve, and what did they do with it? Now, moving to 1966, what happened is that that constitution had a bicameral type of parliament, whereby we had the Senate and the National Assembly. So it was a bicameral. So what happens in 1866, there's amalgamation of these two houses. So they abolished the Senate. So we remain with only one house actually operating. Then moving to 1969, they bring in new laws that centralize power around the presidency. So the president becomes like a supreme leader whose powers, he could even make roadside announcements for ministers, and even actually could send home some ministers also from the roadside. And the president was very powerful. Now, if you look at that, is 69. Now, if you move through Kenyatta's tenure, a lot of changes come in, and we now come into the 82, the Jua state, whereby now Kenya is declared a one-party state after what happened with Zakayo Chuka and the attempted coup d'etat on Moi's government. And moving into the 90s, whereby there was a repeal of Section 2A of the Constitution then to bring in multipartism. And of course, we saw what happened with the multipartism. So we move that way, and we now come to the new struggle for a new constitution. And if you look at now, we talk about the Bomas draft, whereby the citizens themselves sat down and said, we want this constitution. Now, the Wako draft, the Bomas draft, and the CKRC, the Constitution of Kenya Review Commission, coming up with the new constitution under Yash Palgai, Professor Yash Palgai, a constitutional law professor. So if you look at all these things, they really informed the new constitution. First of all, the horrors of 1952, the state of emergency, whereby some rights were suspended. It brought about the Article 25, non-derogable rights that you cannot suspend even in case of a state of an emergency. If you look at the powers of the presidency, the executive was too powerful that we needed to bring separation of powers, so that the judiciary was not, the executive was not that powerful. So we tried to water down the powers of the presidency. But again, these powers are to be checks and balances on the powers of the presidency. And the Bill of Rights, look at what happened in the 80s and the 90s, whereby our rights were not being followed, and a lot of human rights violations. That brought about the Bill of Rights Chapter 4 that we have today. So it has been a history, and as a country, we learned through these hard times, and that is why even when we talk about political parties, the strengthening of the institutions of government, and the independent institutions of government under Chapter 15 is because we believe in them. And the political class, the problem with the political class, if you look at everybody, even if you look at our magazine here, most of the leaders at the front pages, these were the YK92, the students of Moi. So they are doing things in a Moi style. And
they're still stuck in that.
They're still stuck in the past, because if you look at these people, this is YK92 purely. We don't have a new fresh blood inside the political class.
Right.
That is the problem that we have.
And thank you, Floyd, for taking us through the history of